Friday afternoon, East Region, Mississippi State against Baylor. 8-9 matchup. Equally as intriguing to me as Louisville Creighton. Maybe not the coaching matchup. Scott Drew. There are some headlines to be made for sure. I would say X's and O's. This isn't as good of a coaching matchup, but the point spreads are tight within a possession. So current line here, I think Baylor for a short time opened as a favorite, depending on the shop. But Mississippi State painted as a 1.5 point favorite across the board. I took the Bulldogs in my bracket. I don't think I'll have any action on this game from a point spread standpoint, but how are you looking to attack this one, Anthony?
Yeah, it's like the one true coin flip game we have on this 8-9 line. Like the 8-9s this year are a little more imbalanced than they've been in the past. But, I just wonder if Drew goes to a zone, which I suspect we will see because this Baylor defense has really struggled, especially at the rim down the stretch run here. If they just go to a zone, what does Mississippi State do to counter that? Because they don't really have natural zone beaters. Their offense is kind of, they don't see a lot of zone. So I just don't really, obviously Mississippi State will be able to rebound out of that, but I don't really trust their offense. And that's why I still like this Baylor team more in the tournament setting when they get out of this Big 12 than I do a Mississippi State team out of the SEC that if you force them to be shooters, I just don't really know what they've got.
But the point you brought up in between there, and you know this better than anybody watching Syracuse basketball and zone defenses, if Mississippi State could generate second chance opportunities, Baylor is going to get crushed on the glass to me regardless. And I agree with you. Baylor getting out of the Big 12, VJ Edgecombe in a tournament setting. Baylor could very well make a run in this region, probably take Duke wire to wire, and then Duke wins on a funky call down the stretch. Similarly to the game we discussed from a few years back with Virginia Tech and Duke, and also the UCF and Duke game in the second round. Don't get me started on what happened down the stretch in that one. But Baylor defensively, 254th in defensive rebounding rate, and that's with zone mixed in, mind you. If Baylor was healthy up front with Ojanwana, I keep mixing that one up. Either way, Baylor isn't healthy up front. So if they had a little bit more size, but you're playing 5-out offense that at the other end is going to get crushed on the glass because your center is Omier, who's 6'8", who plays bigger than he actually is. But when he was on those Miami teams that, mind you, went to the Final Four a couple of years ago, he was the 4-man. So that's why I can't bet this game, and I would rather play it live because I think either one is a dog of around 2 possessions is worth a bet.
Yeah, I was really impressed by Baylor. I know they lost ultimately to Texas Tech, but, the way that game started, they could have went home, they'd be like, we'll see you next weekend. I mean, they were down 20 early, it felt like. Texas Tech was bombing away. They put up a 50 spot in the first half. But they battled their way back into that game and really almost won it late. And I thought that said a lot to me about where Baylor is as a team because we've seen, of years past where Baylor has kind of faded late. The injuries have kind of hurt them. And even last season, weren't all that competitive with Clemson in that second round game.
But they missed every open shot.
Right. That was part of it too. Right. And that's always part of it when you're relying on really good shot making players. But ultimately in a coin flip game, I think I've got the way better shot making team. And I've got you said the Syracuse thing. I mean, how many times do we see Syracuse do this in March where they just come out of nowhere and teams start missing every open look against them? So, yeah, I mean, I'm ultimately going to bet on the talent of Baylor as a dog here every time.
And Mississippi State could very well struggle shooting the ball, and maybe Baylor plays a little bit bigger than the size than they actually have on the court. But even for just one more comparison, if you want to go back to that 2016 Syracuse team that made it to the Final Four, just size-wise up front, well, actually, Coleman was 6'9". Okay, I'll give you that. And they had a short rotation. So maybe it is comparable. The one thing is, obviously, that region was a little bit more wide open than Baylor having to play Duke, this good of a Duke team in the second round. But I'll give you that. Baylor is a dog of 1.5 points. I'm not touching the game, so I'll give way to your take, and you like the Baylor Bears catching a point and a half. Actually, one more thing on this game. Plus money on the money line, or do you take the point? I know that sounds like a dumb conversation, but it's worth having.
Yeah, I bet money line plus 104. I think it was. I have to look, but yeah, I took money line.
So you're one of those people that says, "Be damned if Baylor loses by a point."
It's funny. I go back and forth on it because even the other day, I was staring at the book for a while, and it was the Xavier game,
Ooh.
2.5 and money line against Marquette in the quarterfinals.
Oh no!
And I was like, I couldn't decide, so I was like, you know what? Let me split it. And I split my bet, and when that 3 went in, I certainly was happy I had split it instead of just taking the money line. But at 1.5, yeah, I'm taking the money line. I mean, how many games fall 1? You know, if I lose by 1, I'm gonna cry about how it was a bad beat either way. So I'll probably just end up taking money line if it comes down to it in that situation.